apparently the other day there was a hostage rescue in Gaza. At the same time, as a part of this rescue, there were over 270 people, Palestinians, that were killed as a result of this. So the question that people are asking themselves since this rescue is, in the end, was it worth, losing over 270 Palestinian lives to bring home 4 people, 4 Israelis? And that is the question that a lot of people are asking. Let's go ahead and get started with this clip here from MSNBC. I have a lot to say about this, so let's dive in.
4 Israeli hostages kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th have been rescued. Their 245-day nightmare coming to an end. NBC News foreign correspondent Raf Sanchez joins us now. So, Raf, what are you hearing about the condition of the hostages and the next steps in the coming days and how all of this came together?
Notice he didn't say anything about all the Palestinians that were killed during this rescue attempt, right? And a lot of people are applauding this rescue. And the people who are just applauding this rescue and just pretending like nothing happened to the Palestinian civilians, they're letting you know that Palestinian life doesn't mean anything. They don't feel like it means anything to them.
So, Michael, the IDF is saying that these 4 hostages freed from Gaza are in good condition medically, and we have seen pictures of Noah Argamani, who our viewers will remember. She was that young woman being taken into Gaza from the music festival on October 7th on the back of that motorcycle, her hands outstretched to her boyfriend, who was also being kidnapped, being marched away into Gaza.
Yeah, let me pause here for just a second because I want to say something here. Let me just move this out. I want to make sure I got the right one here. Yeah, plus I got to fast forward a little bit here. So one of the things that I did want to say about this, and we'll bring this back up so you can see her, notice that she's in good condition, right? So you heard what they said, that medically they were in good condition. The images that I've seen of Palestinian hostages that have been released, they don't look like this. They weren't smiling. They look sick. Some of them look deathly. You can tell there's been abuse, physical abuse that's been done to them. So you can see the difference here. Does she look like she is terrified? Does she look terrified to you guys? No. So we've seen those pictures. We've seen the difference between the way that the hostages have been treated by Hamas based on the pictures and what some of the hostages have said, and the way that they have been treated by Palestinian hostages have been treated by Israelis. Now, let me make sure, because I just want to make sure I don't go into. Okay, yeah. We're going to go back to that video so you can see her. I just wanted to make sure I didn't show the part where she was on the bike. Okay, yeah. So I want you to hear from her. Look at her and listen to how she, look at how she looks.
In the course of this 8 months of war, remember, guys, only 3 other hostages had been rescued alive up until this point. And today, 4 hostages in just a couple of hours. Now, you can see Noah on your screen there. She is speaking to Israeli President Isaac Herzog, who was telling her just how overjoyed Israel is to see her safe, to see her home. There have been scenes of celebration across this country today. The lifeguards on the beach in Tel Aviv announcing the news over loudspeaker, people jumping up and cheering in front of the Mediterranean on this Saturday here in Israel. We met Noah's father, Yaakov, on October 8th, less than 24 hours after his daughter had been kidnapped by Hamas. He is at her side right now. Her mother, as far as we know at this point, is not. Her mother's name is Leora, and she is dying of brain cancer. And for these 8 months, she has been telling the world that her dying wish was to see her daughter once again. Now, she is in very serious condition. She is at another hospital in Tel Aviv, but we believe that mother and daughter are going to be reunited later on today. Noah's boyfriend, Avinatan Or, who you see in that video from October 7th being...
Because I don't want to show that part. So you can see the way that she was treated, right? Okay. So now I want you to listen to Omar Badar, who actually talked about this on CNN, because the thing is this. They are actually covering up information that these hostages have said from mainstream media. There have been a number of outlets. We heard the story about the guy saying that there was a birthday cake that Hamas baked for him for his birthday. They're removing this information. Some of these articles that I saw when this story was first released, now when I try to look up that article, it said, oops, looks like this link does not exist. So they're removing that because that does not fit with the narrative that they've created about Hamas. Obviously, if you've painted an organization as a terrorist organization, obviously telling the world that they baked a birthday cake for one of the hostages doesn't kind of sound like something a terrorist organization would do, right? So it doesn't work. So they're trying to bury this narrative. Omar here was on CNN. I'm glad he was able to come onto CNN because they're more particular about who they're giving a voice to. But one of the things that Omar says is the fact that all of these outlets that are celebrating the return of 4 of the hostages, they're completely dismissing all the Palestinians that have been killed as a result of this rescue mission. And this is important for people to hear. Listen to this.
There's no question, whatever. I know there's some dispute about the specific numbers, but what unfolded yesterday was unquestionably a massacre. We have seen the images of the bodies of children littering the streets. We've seen the horrific scenes of the hospitals of weeping parents and bloody children. And to look at an incident of that scale, to see that many casualties and to celebrate this as any kind of success is effectively to say that the lives of Israelis are more valuable than the lives of Palestinians. That is the only way anybody can celebrate this as a success. Now, it's unsurprising that that's the view of the Israeli government. They've made it absolutely clear that they don't value Palestinian lives at all, not just throughout this campaign of assault on Gaza over the past several months, but Israeli policy towards Palestinians for much, much longer. What has been disappointing is the way our government also has reduced the massacre to a footnote and focused primarily on the retrieval of hostages. And Frederica, all you have to do is just imagine the reverse scenario. Right now, as we speak, there are thousands of Palestinians who have been kidnapped out of Gaza, placed in Israeli detention without any charge or trial. There's an article in the New York Times outlining the absolute horrific abuse they are undergoing on a daily basis. And if Hamas today were to carry out an incursion into Gaza, kill a couple of hundred Israelis, and then retrieve 4 Palestinians, would anyone in our discourse be celebrating this as some kind of victory? Would anyone even know the names of the 4 Palestinians who have been rescued from Israeli detention? We know the answer to that. And that's
right. So the point that Omar's making here, which I think is really important, is that the media and the U.S. government, they don't care about those 270 Palestinian civilians that died. They're just like, yeah, whatever. We got the 4 hostages back. They feel like it was worth it. Now, how could this have been avoided? Very simply, for Israel to accept the ceasefire notice, which they have not, by the way. To accept that ceasefire deal, they could have gotten those hostages back, and those other Palestinians, that 270 plus Palestinians, could still be alive today. But Israel didn't want to do that. Netanyahu didn't want to do that. He had to take the brutal, aggressive approach. Over 270 people killed so that you could get 4 to return. This is not an eye for an eye. Israel has been the aggressor since day one, going way back before October 7th. The way that Israel has chosen to respond has been way over the top, and I don't see how anyone can accept that. What are the names, all the hostages that were rescued that they named on mainstream media? What were the names? What were the names of the 270 Palestinian civilians who were killed? What were their names, MSNBC? What were their names, CNN? You don't know and you don't care. You didn't even ask what their names are. They're disposable to you. This is supremacy at work, fam. This is supremacy at work. It's happening right in front of our eyes. They don't want you to think about those dead Palestinians.
Because we currently have a moment in which it's incredibly upsetting, the fact that we don't see Palestinian lives as equal or as deserving of the same kind of concern. And we carry on just accepting this mantra of Palestinians as collateral damage and a necessity, and continuing to treat the Israeli government as some kind of protagonist in this story, even though they are ultimately responsible for the situation in which we find ourselves in.
So when you hear the National Security Advisor Sullivan saying the preference is a ceasefire from this point forward, do you believe it's possible, and or do you believe that the release or rescue of more hostages can come without the cost of civilian lives?
Yeah, Frederica, it's even more than just civilian lives. The Israeli insistence on pursuing the release of hostages through purely military means has in fact killed far more Israeli hostages than they have rescued. And I'm talking about Israeli bullets and Israeli bombs that cost the lives of their own hostages. There is no question that a ceasefire and an agreement to exchange hostages is the only path forward in which you can guarantee the safety both of Israelis and Palestinians out of all this. We've seen the biggest number of hostages being released the last time there was a temporary ceasefire in which we agreed for an exchange of hostages and prisoners between the two sides. And that is obviously the path forward. There is currently a deal on the table that basically says, in exchange for the end of this war on Gaza that has just utterly devastated Gaza, killed nearly 40,000 people, in exchange for an end to that war, Israel can get all of its hostages back without another person being killed from this point moving forward. There's simply no reason not to accept that, except it seems that the Israeli government's goal of destroying Gaza seems to rank much higher than the lives of their own hostages, which is why we're stuck in this grotesque scenario. And it's why Netanyahu seems to be beholden to the fanatical wing of his own government, who are insisting that the ultimate goal has to be either the ethnic cleansing of Gaza or the permanent reoccupation of Gaza. And we're stuck in this situation where there is no real plan for what happens after this war. And in the meantime, people are going to continue to get killed. The fact that the United States, that the President Biden clearly has some tensions with Netanyahu, unfortunately, those tensions have not led to any real or meaningful pressure.
And you'll see here, this is another thing I wanted to mention to go along with this. There are actually cabinet members, war cabinet members, that are resigning in Israel. So Benny Gantz was one of the ones that quit. He stepped down from Israel's war cabinet. They consider that to be a blow to Netanyahu. I mean, it's all over the place. But I want to explain to you the game that's happening here, you guys. You guys notice it's the same story that's happening over and over again. So it's like we're watching a sitcom episode on repeat. We keep watching the same rerun. Israel does something bad to Palestinian civilians, kills Palestinian civilians, says it's an accident, or say we did targeted strikes that were only towards Hamas, or this time actually we were able to get 4 of the hostages, and every time there's a statement that is made by President Biden or Antony Blinken or Matt Miller or John Kirby from the State Department, and they will make a statement that says that we have made it very clear to Israel that they have to protect as many civilian lives as possible. But we will also make it very clear that Israel has a right to defend itself. It's the same thing over and over, right? Then Joe Biden every now and then will make a press conference appearance and say, Israel has to do what it can to protect civilian life, but Israel has a right to defend itself. This is all a game. I don't think that any of those people that step forward and step up to the mic and say that we have to protect the civilians, I don't believe that any of those people really believe that. This is a script that is on repeat. So listen to the game. Israel does commit a war crime, does an atrocity. The U.S. government has a spokesperson that says, well, we told them they got to protect civilian life. There will be an investigation into this, but Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel does another strike towards civilians in Gaza, whether it's the UN school this time or if it's a tent in a Rafah village. And then another spokesperson comes forward and says that we don't want any civilians to be killed. This is a script. And what I'm trying to get people to understand is that the U.S. government is complicit with what Israel is doing. The U.S. government has already signed off for Bibi and his clan to kill the Palestinian people every time they send them more weapons, every time they follow up that protect civilian line with Israel has a right to defend itself. If the U.S. government actually cared about the Palestinian people and they wanted this to stop and they wanted a real ceasefire, they would not continue to supply the weapons to Bibi. They would not continue to get up there and say that Israel has a right to defend itself. Every time that they had an opportunity to actually put an end to this, they have chosen not to. They have given you rhetoric, repetitive rhetoric. All of them are saying the same statements over and over. That includes Kamala Harris and her whack ass speech as well. This is a game, and that is to trick the American voters that they tried. We cannot forget this is an election season. So all the politicians, they have this game that they play to try to convince the voters that they're trying to prevent more atrocities to the Palestinian people. They have to convince you with that they're trying so that you don't feel bad voting for them in November. Okay, so that's how this game is played. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, they're giving Netanyahu the green light to destroy Gaza. They're giving Netanyahu the green light to do that by continuing to give him weapons and not calling for the permanent ceasefire, by choosing to put sanctions on the ICC, by choosing to denounce the ruling from the ICJ. It is happening right in front of us, folks. And I'm here to tell you that our damn government don't give a damn about those Palestinian people either. Period. Regardless of what they tell you on a podium, during a press conference, they don't care about those civilians. It's word salad, and they're playing you so that you in November will say, well, the Biden administration tried, but Netanyahu didn't listen. So I guess I'll go ahead and support Joe Biden. After all, that's what they're doing. They don't care. And Joe Biden can wipe that look off his face when he comes to the podium at the press conference to make it look like he's sad. And that motherfucker ain't sad. If you were sad, you would stop sending the weapons. If you were sad, you would call for the permanent ceasefire. If you were sad, you wouldn't be lying saying that Hamas is the one who didn't accept the ceasefire agreement when it was Israel who did not accept it. If he was sad, they wouldn't get up there and constantly defend Israel at every damn turn and shaking their hands behind our back. Don't fall for this, folks, especially the younger people. Don't fall for it.
The only way President Biden can actually change Netanyahu's behavior is by credibly threatening to withhold U.S. military funding for Israel. If Netanyahu does not change course, that unfortunately does not seem to be on the table. But I think Gantz is banking on that pressure ramping up moving forward and is trying to express a more clear and decisive disagreement with Netanyahu, hoping that when there is more mounting American and domestic Israeli pressure on Netanyahu, that he might potentially be there to essentially reap the benefits of that discontentment and take charge. But ultimately, really, we're stuck in a situation in which you need a ceasefire. That ceasefire can only be brought about through American meaningful pressure, and that has to mean that America cannot continue just providing unconditional military funding, knowing how these weapons are being used, knowing that every major human rights organization in the world is describing Israeli bombings in Gaza as indiscriminate, as costing too many civilian lives. That is not something that the United States should be complicit in. It's really way belatedly about time to say that we have to put an end to that kind of support in order to achieve that meaningful change, regardless of what Israeli prime minister happens to be in charge when that change comes about. There's no.
Yes. So Omar is correct there. Notice he said, regardless of who the prime minister is when that change comes about, because they can do the same thing that Netanyahu's doing. Now, Chris Hedges, I don't know if you guys know this, but Chris Hedges actually, he started his own YouTube show. I think he had a YouTube channel, but, you know, he's not with Real News anymore. He said something recently about the death count that he agrees with what Ralph Nader said. They keep saying, oh, it's over 30,000 people. No, if you were to do the math, like Ralph Nader did the math, and Ralph Nader is estimating it's over 200,000. Listen to what Chris Hedges said.
Do you think the death count in Gaza is being undercounted? Oh, certainly. I mean, Ralph Nader, I was speaking to him the other day. He thinks it's 200,000. It wouldn't surprise me if it's that high. It's not even close to, what is it now? What, about 40,000?
Yeah. That's a really good point. The number, I think, is definitely higher. And then we still have the ambassador, Linda Thomas Greenfield, who was lying her ass off on X. She said, new today, the UN Security Council sent a clear message to Hamas. Accept the ceasefire hostage deal on the table. Israel has already accepted this deal. The fighting could stop today, and hostages could come home today if Hamas agreed to the deal. Now, she wrote this yesterday, so I had to respond, and I said, stop lying. And I shared this. Netanyahu says he won't halt Gaza war, disputes Biden's ceasefire proposal. But notice how her and all the other State Department reps, they are framing this as though it is Hamas that are the ones that are not accepting the ceasefire deal. As if we don't know how to Google. As if we don't know how to Google, let's see who's accepting the ceasefire. Look, that didn't take me long. You know how quick I found that? As if we're stupid. This woman, the woman who has blood on her hands, the woman who always raising her hand up in the damn air, Linda. Once again, what I tell you guys, it's always a black face that they put in this position, the ones to sell people down the river. If it's not her, it's Colin Powell. If it's not Colin Powell, it's Condoleezza Rice. If it's not Condoleezza Rice, it's Kamala Harris. If it's not her, it's Richie Torres, Afro-Latino, but they still try to pass him off as one. If it's not him, it's Hakeem Jeffries. This is what they do every time. She's the one who goes into the UN Security Council and raises her hand with blood on her hands. Not Joe Biden. Not John Kirby. They send a black woman in there to do it. And then they send her to lie, telling repeated lies. Even Antony Blinken continuing to lie. Listen to this.
And of course, what separates Israel, the United States, and other democracies when it comes to incredibly difficult situations like this is our respect for international law. And as appropriate, the laws of war. We know that Israel will take all of the precautions that it can, just as we would. And again, that's what separates us from Hamas. And of course, what separates Israel, the United States, and other democracies when it comes to incredibly difficult situations like this is our respect for international law.
So here he is lying, said Israel respects international law when you have human rights organizations, when you have the ICJ that has said Israel is not following international law. So here you have Antony Blinken lying to protect Israel. Because I guess all these organizations are lying and Israel is the only one telling the truth, even though we have video footage and we've seen photos to prove it. So here's Antony Blinken showing his whole ass. Anything to continue to simp for Israel. Antony Blinken don't care about those Palestinian kids that died. I don't care what he says. These people are actors. We just have to figure out how to close the damn curtain. Because it's time for them to exit the stage. The fact that they can just overlook all of those civilians that have died. It's disgusting. such a mess.